The first sign of trouble should have been Marcus insisting on the crimson dress. I'd laid out an emerald gown that brought out the green in my eyes, but he'd fixated on the one he'd purchased weeks ago, the one left hanging in my closet with a terse note. Wear this tonight. At 28, I knew which arguments to sidestep. A dress wasn't a hill worth dying on, particularly not on this night. The anniversary of our engagement was meant for celebration, not strife. The Zenith Lounge crowned the top of the 875 North Michigan Avenue building, a universe of crystal fixtures and panoramic windows that offered a god's-eye view of Chicago's glittering grid. I'd visited once before, for a party celebrating my promotion at the architecture firm. Marcus had grumbled about the exorbitant prices the whole time. Tonight, he had made the reservation himself. My heels echoed on the polished marble as the host greeted me, his professional smile failing to warm his eyes. Ms. Jones, your party has arrived. Your party, not your fiancé. That phrasing should have been my second clue. I followed him through the dining room, painfully aware of the heads turning to watch me pass. The Zenith was a magnet for Chicago's upper crust. Old money from the Gold Coast, new tech wealth from the West Loop, and all the ambitious climbers in between converged here to see and be seen. I spotted faces from society pages and business journals. At least 200 people, all swathed in designer clothes, and adorned with jewelry that cost more than my yearly salary. Marcus was seated at a prominent table near the room's center, a prime spot for maximum exposure. But he wasn't by himself. Bianca Vanderbilt sat in the chair that was supposed to be mine. Her blonde hair was a cascade of perfect waves. Her dress was a whisper of silk that likely cost 5 figures, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I knew of her, of course. Vanderbilt hospitality had been a Chicago institution for generations. She'd graced the cover of Crane's Chicago Business just last month. I came to a halt a few feet from their table, my portfolio, holding the blueprints I'd poured the last month of my life into perfecting, suddenly felt like a lead weight in my hands. Marcus rose, his face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. Amara, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. As if I were a business acquaintance, not the woman he'd asked to be his wife a year ago. Marcus, what's going on? My voice was far steadier than I felt. He gestured to a vacant chair across from them. Please have a seat. There's something we need to discuss. I remained standing. Every nerve ending screamed at me to turn around, to walk out before the inevitable blow could land. But my pride was a stubborn anchor, rooting me to the spot. I would not flee, not with 200 pairs of eyes on me. Marcus shot a glance at Bianca, who offered a nod of encouragement. He cleared his throat. I've been doing a lot of thinking about our future, Amara, about what I require in a partner as I advance in my career. My fingers clenched around the portfolio. Your career? I'm making a run for the city council next year. It's an opportunity I can't afford to miss, but it demands certain strategic alignments. He gestured toward Bianca. Bianca understands the political arena, her family's influence, her familiarity with public life. She's the kind of partner who can ensure my success. The words struck me like a series of physical impacts. All around us, the ambient chatter had subsided. People were tuning in. You brought me here to end our engagement. The statement was flat, devoid of question. I am, yes. Marcus reached into his suit jacket and produced a small velvet box. Inside was my engagement ring, the one I'd left on his nightstand last week after the band had begun to feel too tight. He'd promised to have it resized. He opened the box, took out the ring, and placed it on the table between us. I believe a clean break is for the best. You're ambitious, Amara. You've always been driven by your work, by your desire to make a name for yourself. People might perceive you as being with me for my connections, for what my family could do for your firm. A hot flush of shame and anger crept up my neck. You think I'm using you for your connections? I'm merely pointing out the optics. You were promoted from a junior designer to a project lead just 6 months after we got engaged. People notice these things. Bianca leaned in, her expression a mask of feigned pity. It's nothing personal, darling. Marcus just needs someone who gets his world, someone who was born into it, not trying to claw their way in. The portfolio slipped from my grasp, landing on the floor with a sickening thud. My blueprints scattered across the marble. the project I had sacrificed sleep and sanity to finish, the design that had won me my promotion through sheer talent and 80-hour work weeks, now lay at their feet like discarded trash. Marcus didn't even look down. I hope you can see this is what's best for us both. You'll find someone more suited to your station eventually. Around us, smartphones had materialized from pockets and purses. The flash of cameras sparked in my periphery. Someone was recording this. Multiple someones. I should have delivered a scathing retort, a perfectly crafted exit line that would have haunted him for the rest of his life. Instead, I bent down, my hands trembling as I gathered my scattered plans and straightened up. "Keep the ring," I managed, my voice sounding hollow and distant. "Consider it a fee for the year of my life I just wasted." I turned and walked toward the exit, each step feeling like I was wading through wet cement. The low hum of conversation had become a dull roar in my ears, a mix of pitying glances and poorly hidden smirks followed me to the door. The host averted his gaze as I passed. He had known. They had all known what this evening was truly for. The cool October air hit my face like a slap as I pushed through the heavy glass doors. The Chicago wind has a unique bite, and it sliced right through the crimson dress Marcus had chosen. The dress he'd wanted me to wear for my public execution. I made it half a block before my composure crumbled. A quiet side street off Michigan Avenue offered shadows and a moment of solitude. I sank onto the cold curb, the dress pooling around me, the portfolio clutched to my chest like a shield. The tears finally came, hot and humiliating and utterly unstoppable. A year of my life, a year spent believing in a future that had just been publicly torched in front of an audience who were likely already sharing the footage on social media. Footsteps approached, but I didn't have the energy to look up. Let them stare, let them get their pictures. Nothing could make this moment worse. "Ms. Jones." The voice was deep, resonant, and utterly unfamiliar. I glanced up through a blur of tears. A man stood a few feet away, silhouetted by the streetlights. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with a powerful build that his tailored black suit couldn't conceal. But it was his eyes that held me captive. They were dark, almost black in the dim light, and they were fixed on me with an intensity that felt almost physical. "I don't need any help," I said, wiping at my cheeks. I would argue otherwise. He took a step closer. "There are photographers on their way. In about 30 seconds, they will round that corner and find you here, crying on a curb. By morning, those images will be everywhere." As if his words had conjured them, I heard voices echoing from the direction of the restaurant, male voices, loud and opportunistic. The stranger extended a hand. "My car is waiting, unless you'd rather give them the spectacle thereafter." I stared at his hand, strong, with long fingers and a platinum watch that gleamed under the streetlight. I had no reason on earth to trust him, but the voices were getting closer. I took his hand, and he pulled me to my feet with surprising ease. A black sedan, sleek and understatedly expensive, was idling at the curb. He opened the back door for me, and I slid inside, blueprints and all. He followed, settling beside me with a quiet grace. The door shut, encasing us in a cocoon of rich leather and darkness. "Drive," he said to the man at the wheel. The car pulled smoothly away from the curb, just as 3 men carrying cameras rounded the corner. I shrank against the far door, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Who are you?" He turned those dark eyes on me, and his expression held something that was neither threatening nor safe. It was something else entirely. "Someone who just observed your very public humiliation," he said softly, "and someone who may have a solution to your problem." The car's interior smelled of leather and something else, something that hinted at power held in a careful reserve. I hugged my portfolio tighter, suddenly aware of the sheer recklessness of my actions. Getting into a stranger's car to escape photographers. Impressive survival skills, Amara. "You can let me out at the nearest L station," I said, trying to sound like a woman who frequently fled public humiliations in luxury cars with mysterious men. I could do that. He shifted to face me more directly, the passing city lights illuminating his features in flashes. A strong jaw, a faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow, and eyes that were assessing me as if I were a blueprint. He was checking for structural flaws. "Or, you could hear my proposition first." I don't need a white knight with a hero complex. His mouth tilted at the corners in something that wasn't quite a smile. I assure you, I don't have a hero complex. What I have is a business matter that requires a partner in your exact situation. My situation? I let out a brittle laugh. You mean publicly disgraced and likely unemployed by tomorrow morning? Not unemployed yet, he corrected. But yes, that video is already trending. You can check your phone if you doubt me. I didn't want to, but my hand instinctively went to my purse and pulled out my phone. The screen was a flood of notifications. Texts from concerned colleagues, missed calls from my sister, and there it was, trending on multiple platforms. Marcus Thorne announces engagement to Bianca Vanderbilt. The accompanying clip showed me frozen at the table, my blueprints cascading to the floor. The comments were a vicious mix of pity and scorn. "They're going to fire me," I said, the words coming out flat. My recent promotion was tied to maintaining the firm's pristine reputation. A viral scandal doesn't exactly scream professional decorum. "Probably," he said, offering no false comfort, which leads me to my offer. I need a wife. I turned to stare at him, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me." 6 months. A contractual marriage for business purposes. In return, I will ensure Marcus Thorne's political career is over before it starts. And I will pay you $500,000. The number hung in the air between us, a tangible thing. $500,000, enough to start my own firm. Enough to never have to rely on anyone else's reputation again. "This is insane," I whispered. "I don't even know who you are." "Darius Sterling," he said, as if the name itself were an explanation. And it was. Even I, who actively avoided news about the city's criminal underbelly, had heard that name. The Sterling organization was rumored to control vast territories on the south and west sides. Logistics, real estate, and a dozen other enterprises that would likely make my law-abiding conscience squirm. "You're a gangster." "I'm a businessman who operates in the gray areas," he corrected, his tone perfectly level. "I need to finalize a partnership with several old guard families who place a high value on stability and tradition. A wife lends an air of legitimacy. Why not find someone who actually wants to be your wife? Because this is a transaction, not a romance. Romance introduces unnecessary complications. You require financial security and retribution against the man who shamed you. I require a spouse for 6 months to close a deal worth substantially more than what I'm offering you. It's a clean exchange." The car glided through the Chicago night, and I realized I had no idea where we were headed. "Stop the car. We're 3 blocks from your apartment. You can consider my offer, and if you're interested, you'll call the number on this card." He produced a business card from his jacket. It was made of heavy, expensive stock, bearing only a phone number. "And if I'm not interested? Then you face tomorrow's fallout on your own, and I assure you, it will be brutal." The car stopped in front of my building, a modest walk-up in a Lincoln Park neighborhood that was gentrifying just slowly enough for me to afford the rent. The driver, a large man I'd barely noticed, got out and opened my door. Darius Sterling remained in the shadows of the back seat. "Think about it, Ms. Jones. 6 months of your life in exchange for the resources to build the future you want. And the deep satisfaction of watching Marcus Thorne lose everything he values." I climbed out, my legs unsteady, the blueprints crushed against my chest. This is crazy. Most worthwhile things are. The door closed, and the car pulled away, leaving me on the sidewalk with a business card in my hand and no idea what to do. My apartment felt claustrophobic and hollow as I trudged up the 4 flights of stairs. I spread the blueprints on my kitchen table and, against my better judgment, opened social media again. The video had been shared over 40,000 times. The comments section was a cesspool. Half the people called me a gold digger who got her just desserts. The other half offered a cloying pity that felt even worse. I held out for 2 days. 2 days of my colleagues offering sympathetic glances, and my boss gently suggesting I take some personal time to let the situation cool down. 2 days of watching potential clients back away from projects, citing concerns about negative publicity. On the morning of the 3rd day, I stared at Darius Sterling's business card and made a choice that would either salvage my life or utterly demolish what was left of it. The phone was answered on the first ring by a man's voice. Location. Not hello, not a business greeting. just the direct query of someone who had been expecting my call. I gave him my office address, and he hung up without another word. 20 minutes later, a text message arrived. Black SUV at the corner in 5 minutes. Get in. The SUV was exactly where promised, and its driver remained silent as we navigated midday traffic toward the industrial corridor along the Chicago River. This wasn't the polished, tourist-friendly Riverwalk. It was the city's working arteries, where warehouses stood like concrete sentinels and barges moved sluggishly through the water. We stopped in front of a building that looked derelict from the outside. The driver nodded toward a side door, and I realized I was supposed to go in alone. The interior was a stark contrast to the dilapidated exterior. A sleek, modern office occupied the ground floor, filled with minimalist furniture and cutting-edge technology. But it was the men who caught my attention. 3 of them were positioned around the room, all watching me with a quiet alertness that spoke of military training and concealed firearms. Ms. Jones. Darius emerged from a back office. Daylight did nothing to soften his features. If anything, it made him seem more formidable. He was tall and powerfully built, dressed in another suit that likely cost more than my car. Thank you for coming. I haven't agreed to anything, but you're here, he countered, which means you're considering it. He gestured toward his office. Please. The office contained a large desk, 2 chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the working docks. He shut the door, cutting off the sight of his armed guards. I need to know what this would actually entail, I said, choosing to remain on my feet. What does marriage mean in this context? Living together, public events? Yes to both. You would move into my residence. We would attend certain social functions together. We would present a united front, the image of a committed couple. But separate bedrooms? No physical expectations? Separate bedrooms, he confirmed. No physical intimacy unless mutually agreed upon for the sake of appearances, and you would maintain complete autonomy in your professional life. Except I can't tell anyone the truth. Correct. To the outside world, our marriage is genuine. The contract itself is strictly confidential. I crossed my arms. And your other business? The parts that operate in the gray areas? You will not question my operational decisions. However, you are free to voice any concerns regarding my legitimate construction ventures. I own several development companies that operate entirely within the bounds of the law. For 6 months. 6 months. Then we file for a quiet divorce. You receive your payment and we go our separate ways. I looked out at the docks, at the cargo being loaded onto ships. Cargo I was probably better off not knowing about. And Marcus? You said you would ruin his career. I have extensive connections in both political and legal circles. By the time I am finished, Marcus Thorne will be lucky to find work chasing ambulances in Gary. There was no emotion in his voice, just the calm statement of a fact. When would this happen? The marriage? Within 48 hours. I have a judge who is indebted to me. It will be a private ceremony, but legally binding. This is completely insane. You've said that before. Is that a no? I turned back to him. His dark eyes held no judgment, no pressure, only a patient stillness, as if he were waiting for a decision he was already certain I had made. Perhaps I had. $500,000, I said, in writing, and I want it stipulated that separate bedrooms means exactly that. No gray areas. Done. He moved to his desk, retrieved a document that looked like it had been prepared well in advance, and slid it across the polished surface. Read it. Take your time. If you agree, you sign. I read every single word. The contract was surprisingly direct. A 6-month term, marriage in name and legal status. The sum of $500,000 to be deposited into an account of my choosing upon the successful finalization of his business deal, with a clause guaranteeing payment even if the deal collapsed through no fault of my own. My hand trembled slightly as I signed my name at the bottom. Darius added his signature below mine, had it witnessed by one of his men, and then extended his hand to me. Welcome to the arrangement, Mrs. Sterling. His grip was firm, warm, and utterly devoid of anything that felt like safety. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a discreet building in the Gold Coast that didn't advertise its opulence. There was no doorman, only biometric scanners and cameras positioned to cover every possible approach. Darius's driver had delivered my belongings 3 hours earlier. Now I stood in the marble foyer of my new home, feeling like an interloper in a private museum. "Your room is this way." Darius moved past me, his presence seeming to fill the vast, open-plan living space. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom larger than my entire previous apartment, complete with a king-size bed, a sitting area, and an ensuite bathroom with a rainfall shower. Windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. "Everything you require should be in here." Naomi took care of the arrangements. Naomi? My sister. She oversees certain aspects of our family's enterprises. She'll want to meet you. He said it casually, but his tone implied this meeting would be more of an interrogation than a friendly introduction. The apartment itself was not what I'd expected. I had pictured something gaudy, a flamboyant display of wealth like Bianca Vanderbilt's family estate. Instead, the space spoke of quiet, confident power. Modern furniture in a neutral palette, museum-quality art that was probably worth more than I wanted to imagine, and an underlying sense that this home was also a fortress. "The security system will need your fingerprint," Darius continued, leading me to a panel by the door. "Press here." I did as he asked, watching as the system registered my biometrics. Seems a bit much for a temporary arrangement. Nothing in my life permits for lax security. He stepped back, studying me with that same analytical gaze from the car. "You will find that precautions are a necessity, not an indulgence. Because of your business. Because I have enemies who would not hesitate to use anyone connected to me as leverage. Which is why, from this moment on, you do not leave this building without security." My back stiffened. That wasn't in the contract. It was implied in the clause regarding my responsibility to ensure your safety. I take that responsibility very seriously. Before I could protest, the private elevator chimed. Darius's posture shifted, and I realized he had subtly positioned himself between me and the entrance. The door slid open to reveal a woman who could only be Naomi. She had Darius's dark eyes and sharp, intelligent features, but where his presence hinted at controlled force, hers radiated a cool, calculated intellect. She was in her mid-30s, dressed in a tailored suit that was both professional and vaguely menacing. She entered the apartment with the assurance of someone who felt she belonged here far more than I ever would. "So this is the architect." Naomi's eyes swept over me, taking in everything from my department store dress to the defensive posture of my shoulders. "Amara Jones, 28, recently promoted, then publicly humiliated by an ex-fiancé who's trading up for political advantage. An interesting choice, Darius." "Naomi." The warning in Darius's voice was unmistakable. "What?" "I'm merely acknowledging that your new wife has had a trying week." She moved closer, and I had to fight the urge to step back. "I need to be certain you know what you've gotten yourself into. My brother's world is not a safe one, and marriage to him, even a temporary one, paints a target on your back." "She has been briefed," Darius said. "Briefed is not the same as understanding." Naomi circled me slowly, and I felt like a specimen under a microscope. "Tell me, Amara, if someone were to put a gun to your head and demand information about Darius's dealings, what would you do?" "I don't know anything about his dealings." "Precisely, and you will keep it that way. You will ask no questions about where he goes, who he meets, or what business is conducted in those riverfront warehouses. In this world, ignorance isn't just bliss, it's a survival strategy." "Naomi, that's enough." Darius's tone hardened. She held up her hands in a gesture of mock surrender. "Just ensuring we're all on the same page. I'll let you two get settled. Amara, I'm sure we'll be seeing a great deal of each other." The smile she gave me held no warmth. "Welcome to the family." The elevator doors closed behind her, and a heavy silence descended upon the apartment. "She doesn't trust me," I stated. "She doesn't trust anyone," Darius replied, moving to the massive windows, his hands in his pockets. "It's what has kept her alive, but she will come around. Naomi respects competence, and your professional record is impeccable." "How comforting." He glanced back at me, a flicker of something close to amusement in his expression. "You should get some rest. We have an event tomorrow night. The annual fundraiser for the Children's Foundation. Black tie. It will be a major affair, and your ex-fiancé will undoubtedly be there with his new prize. My stomach tightened at the thought. Already? Proving our marriage is real requires us to be seen in the right places. This gala is the perfect stage. Besides, he added, a slight edge to his voice, watching the look on Marcus's face when we walk in together should be entertaining. For you, and perhaps for both of us. He headed toward what I assumed was his own bedroom wing. There's a dress for you in the closet. Naomi selected it. There's also a safe with jewelry. The combination is your birth date. He disappeared into his room before I could fully process that last detail. The safe in my closet contained a collection of jewelry that made my breath catch. Diamond necklaces, sapphire earrings, pieces that looked like they belonged in a museum exhibit. Not around my neck. I selected a pair of simple diamond studs, hoping they wouldn't make me feel like a child playing dress-up. The dress, however, was impossible to downplay. It was a deep navy silk that managed to be both sophisticated and alluring, cut to fit me perfectly despite Naomi never having taken my measurements. I tried not to think about how she had obtained that information. Sleep was elusive that night. Every creak and hum of the unfamiliar apartment jolted me awake. Around 2 a.m, I gave up and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. Darius was sitting at the island, his laptop open, still dressed in the suit he'd worn earlier. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "Can't sleep?" he finally asked. "Strange bed. Strange life." I poured water from the dispenser. "Do you ever sleep?" "Not often. It comes with the territory." He closed his laptop. "You'll get used to it. Most people do. Most people haven't signed a contract to marry a stranger." A fair point. He studied me from across the kitchen, and I was suddenly conscious of the fact that I was wearing nothing but an oversized t-shirt and shorts. "For what it's worth, I will do everything in my power to ensure these 6 months don't ruin your life. Just temporarily rearrange it." "Exactly." That slight, almost smile returned. "Tomorrow night will set the precedent. People will talk. They'll speculate, likely invent elaborate backstories for us. Let them. The more they focus on our relationship, the less they'll focus on other matters." "You mean your actual business." "I mean anything that is not your concern." He stood, and I was reminded of how much space he took up just by existing. "Get some rest, Amara. Tomorrow will be much easier if you're not exhausted." He left me alone in the vast kitchen. I finished my water in the dark, watching the city lights blur through the panoramic windows. The next evening came far too quickly. The dress fit as if it had been molded to my body, and the diamond studs added just enough sparkle without screaming desperation. I stared at my reflection, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at me. It was professional armor, I told myself, just another kind of blueprint to follow. Darius was waiting in the living area, and when I emerged, something in his expression shifted. It wasn't just approval, it was a recognition that I had understood the assignment. "You look perfect," he said simply. "Thank you for being so clear that this is a performance." His mouth curved slightly. "Everything is a performance, Amara. The only question is how well you play your part." The ride to the Art Institute of Chicago was silent. Darius spent the time on his phone, speaking in low tones about logistics and schedules that I made a point not to overhear. When we arrived, the entrance was flanked by a gauntlet of photographers. Darius got out first, then turned and offered me his hand. "Ready?" No, not in the slightest. But I took his hand anyway and allowed him to lead me into the blinding storm of camera flashes. Questions were shouted from the press line. "Mr. Sterling, who's your date?" "Is it true you were recently married?" "Ms. Jones, how long have you known Darius Sterling?" Darius ignored them all, his hand settling firmly on the small of my back as we moved through the entrance. The touch was a brand through the silk of my dress, possessive and deliberate. Message received, I thought. To everyone watching, I now belonged to him. The museum's main hall was a glittering sea of Chicago's elite. I recognized business moguls, city officials, and more than a few faces from the society pages. And there, near the center of the room, stood Marcus and Bianca. They spotted us the same moment we saw them. Marcus's expression morphed from smug confidence to confusion, then to something that looked alarmingly like panic. Darius leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. Shall we go say hello to your ex-fiancé? I think it's time he met your husband. The possessive weight he put on the word husband shouldn't have sent a jolt of heat through me, but it did. And I let Darius guide me directly toward the couple who had orchestrated my humiliation less than a week ago. This was going to be interesting. Marcus's face cycled through several shades of pale as we approached. Confusion gave way to recognition, then to genuine alarm as he registered Darius's hand resting on my waist. Amara! He struggled to regain his composure. I wasn't expecting to see you here. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. I kept my voice light, almost cheerful. Marcus, Bianca, I'd like you to meet my husband, Darius Sterling. Bianca's perfectly curated smile faltered. Husband? That's not possible. Your engagement just ended a week ago. Darius's tone was conversational, but his sheer presence commanded the attention of everyone nearby. A week is more than enough time for Amara and me to realize what we have. We were married 3 days ago in a private ceremony. Marcus's jaw worked, but no sound came out. He knew the name Sterling. Everyone in Chicago's circles of power knew that name and what it represented. How convenient, Bianca managed, her recovery quicker than his. You certainly didn't waste any time moving on, Amara. Darius's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly at my waist. My wife has no need to justify her choices to anyone, especially not to those who lack the basic decency to treat her with respect. The temperature in our small circle seemed to drop by 20 degrees. Marcus cleared his throat. Of course, we wish you both all the best. I'm sure you do, Darius said, his smile containing no warmth whatsoever. Enjoy your evening. He guided me away before either of them could formulate a response, his hand a constant, reassuring pressure against my back. We moved through clusters of guests, and I could feel their eyes on us, their whispers trailing in our wake. That was brutal, I murmured. That was necessary, he replied. By tomorrow morning, everyone who matters in this city will know you are not to be trifled with. He flagged down a passing waiter and procured 2 glasses of champagne. Now, we mingle, we let them see us together, and we solidify the narrative that this marriage is real. The next hour was a blur of introductions. There were business partners of Darius, politicians with overly eager handshakes, and socialites who assessed my dress and jewelry with the predatory gaze of appraisers. Darius navigated it all with an effortless command, introducing me as his wife with a possessiveness that felt unnervingly real. When we finally found a quiet alcove near the museum's collection of impressionist paintings, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You're a natural at this, Darius observed. Most people find these events tedious. I spent years attending firm events, where I was the youngest person in the room by 2 decades. I learned how to blend in. I took a sip of the champagne, which was, of course, exquisite. Though I'm not usually playing the part of a crime lord's wife. Technically, you're playing the part of my wife, he corrected. The crime lord aspect is incidental. Right, because people definitely see you as just another businessman. His expression shifted, something darker creeping into his eyes. They see what I permit them to see: power, influence, success. The methods I use to acquire those things are deliberately kept vague. Before I could reply, Naomi appeared out of the crowd like a sharply dressed phantom. Darius, we have a situation. His demeanor changed in an instant. The charming husband vanished, replaced by someone colder, harder. What kind of situation? Rico Vargas is here. He's showing architectural plans for a new development in Pullman to the Castellano family, over in the modern wing. A silent look passed between the siblings, a communication I couldn't begin to interpret. Darius's jaw tightened. Excuse me for a moment. He disappeared into the throng with Naomi, leaving me alone amongst priceless works of art. I should have stayed put, played the role of the beautiful wife awaiting her husband's return. But a professional curiosity I couldn't suppress pulled me toward the modern wing. The gallery housed a collection of contemporary sculpture, and a small group had gathered near a massive steel installation. I recognized some of the faces from earlier. The Castellanos, an old money family with deep roots and rumored connections that spanned continents. And there, presenting a set of large blueprints spread across a table, was a man who could only be Rico Vargas. He was shorter than Darius, stockier, with slicked-back hair and eyes that held a casual cruelty. His suit was expensive, and he wore it like a suit of armor. "The location is perfect," Rico was saying, gesturing to the plans. "Direct access to the rail lines, minimal community pushback. We can break ground within 3 months of getting the city's approval." I edged closer, trying to get a better look at the blueprints. My architectural instincts took over, and I found myself analyzing the drawings with a critical eye. Something was off. The specifications for the structural supports were insufficient for a building of the proposed height. The foundation design didn't account for the unique soil composition of the Pullman area, and the loading bay was designed to accommodate vehicles far larger than standard commercial trucks. This wasn't a legitimate development. It was a purpose-built facility designed to hide something. "Amara!" Darius was suddenly at my elbow, his voice neutral, but his body radiating tension. "I see you found the architectural discussion." Rico's gaze snapped to me, his eyes assessing and dismissive all at once. "Your wife has an interest in construction." "My wife is an architect," Darius said, his hands settling on my lower back again. "A very talented one. What do you think of the plans, my love?" The endearment sounded so natural, so practiced. I played my part. "They're ambitious, though I couldn't help but notice the foundation specs seem a bit light for new construction in that area." Rico's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "My engineers have assured me the design is sound." "I'm sure they have," I said, keeping my tone light and conversational. "It's just that the soil in that part of the south side typically requires deeper pilings for any structure over 6 stories. These plans show 8 stories with a relatively shallow foundation. It just seems risky." A heavy silence fell over the small group. The Castellanos exchanged meaningful glances. Rico's eyes narrowed into slits. "Perhaps your wife should stick to her own projects, Sterling," he said softly. "Perhaps your engineers should re-examine their work," Darius replied, his voice still pleasant but laced with something lethal. "My wife has designed multiple structures in this city. If she spots a flaw, there is usually a flaw." We left the gallery shortly after. Darius's grip on my arm was gentle but firm as he led me toward the exit. We collected our coats in silence, and the car ride home was thick with an unspoken tension. "I didn't mean to overstep," I said finally. "You didn't overstep. You saw something I should have caught myself." He stared out the window at the passing streetlights. "Vargas isn't building office space. He's building a depot for contraband, likely weapons or drugs. The inadequate foundation would actually help him, allowing for unpermitted underground expansions. And you stopped it by having me point out the design flaws." "I stopped it by ensuring the Castellanos know the project is a liability. They won't invest in something that could literally collapse and bring federal inspectors down on everyone involved." He turned to face me. "You may have just averted a turf war." The weight of his words settled on me. "I thought I wasn't supposed to get involved in your business." "You weren't getting involved in my business. You were applying your professional expertise to a set of architectural plans. There is a distinction." Something in his expression shifted. "Thank you." The penthouse felt different when we returned, less like a fortress and more like a shared territory. Darius loosened his tie, poured a measure of whiskey from a crystal decanter, and gestured to the sofa. "Sit. We need to talk." I obeyed, kicking off the heels that had been torturing my feet for hours. He sat at the other end of the couch, maintaining a respectful distance. "Vargas will figure out that you're the one who spotted the issues with his plans," Darius said. "He will see you as an obstacle." "Should I be worried?" "I will not let anything happen to you," he stated, a flat certainty in his voice. "But you need to understand that by helping me tonight, you have stepped deeper into my world than either of us anticipated." I studied him in the apartment's low light, the strong lines of his face, the scar through his eyebrow that hinted at a violent past, the eyes that held too many secrets. "Why do I feel like this arrangement just got a lot more complicated?" "Because you're smart enough to know when the terms have changed." He took a slow sip of his whiskey. "The question is whether you're prepared for what that means." Before I could formulate a response, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my boss. "Effective immediately, you are on paid administrative leave pending a review of recent events. We will reassess your position in 30 days. I showed the screen to Darius. He read it without a change in expression. They're trying to appease clients who see you as a liability, he said. It's a temporary setback. By this time next week, you will have more project offers than you can manage. How can you possibly know that? Because this city is already buzzing about Darius Sterling's brilliant architect wife, who publicly dismantled Rico Vargas's plans without even raising her voice. That combination of composure and expertise, it's a valuable commodity. He stood, taking his glass, and started toward his bedroom. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't just stand in the corner like I expected you to. Your instincts tonight were flawless. The compliment shouldn't have warmed me. This was a business transaction, 6 months and $500,000. But as I finally made my way to my own room, I caught myself smiling at my reflection. And the woman looking back at me seemed different. Stronger, more sure of herself. This is dangerous territory, I thought. Getting used to this life. I fell asleep anyway. And for the first time since I'd moved into the penthouse, I slept through the entire night. My paid leave became an unexpected period of freedom. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't rushing to a morning commute or panicking over evening deadlines. I should have relished it, but a restless energy drove me back to my work. Within a week, I was immersed in personal projects, drafting plans from the quiet of Darius's penthouse while he conducted business I deliberately avoided asking about. We had settled into a strange domestic rhythm. We shared breakfast when his schedule permitted, engaging in careful conversations that never strayed too close to personal matters. At night, we were respectful strangers occupying opposite ends of the vast apartment. The tension from the gala had softened into something manageable, almost comfortable, which should have been my first clue that our fragile equilibrium was about to be shattered. I was reviewing the blueprints for a residential building I'd been designing in my spare time when Darius strode out of his office, his phone pressed to his ear. The careful control he usually maintained had vanished, replaced by a raw, dark intensity. How many, he listened, his jaw tightening. Keep her there, I'm on my way. He ended the call and turned to me. Get your coat, we're leaving. What's wrong? There's a situation at one of my construction sites. I need to handle it in person. He was already moving toward the door, grabbing a jacket from the hall closet. You're coming with me. Why would I go to a construction site? Because leaving you here alone makes you a vulnerability. He held the door open, and the look on his face told me that arguing would be a waste of breath. The site was in the South Loop, a commercial high-rise that Darius's legitimate construction company was erecting. Scaffolding scaled 6 stories, and workers moved between floors even in the late afternoon. Darius's driver pulled directly onto the site, past security guards who waved us through without a second glance. Malik, Darius's head of security, and a man who looked as if he'd been chiseled from a block of granite, met us at the entrance. Boss, she's in the foreman's trailer. She's shaken up, but she's not hurt. She? I followed Darius toward a modular trailer at the edge of the site. The site manager, someone left her a message. It was specifically about you. A cold dread spread through my chest. Inside the trailer, a woman in her 50s sat at a desk, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee. She looked up when we entered, and relief washed over her face. Mr. Sterling, thank God. I didn't know who else to call. Darius went to her desk, where a piece of paper lay on the surface. I moved closer to read the crude, block-lettered message. Tell Sterling his architect wife should stay out of things that don't concern her. When did you find this? Darius's voice was flat, devoid of emotion in a way that was more terrifying than any display of anger. About 2 hours ago, it was taped to my office door. I called Malik right away. Good. Take the rest of the day off. Malik will see to it that you get home safely. Darius carefully picked up the note and slid it into his jacket pocket. Amara, wait in the car. I want to inspect the site. He turned to me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something in his eyes that made my breath catch. It was fear. Pure, undisguised fear. Amara, I'm an architect, Darius. If someone is threatening me over a construction project, I want to see what they're so worried about. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he gave a single sharp nod. Malik, do another sweep of the perimeter. I'm taking her up. The construction site smelled of wet concrete, sawdust, and steel. Darius stayed close as we climbed the temporary stairs to the second floor, his hand hovering near the small of my back, but never quite making contact. His security team fanned out around us, their eyes scanning every shadow. "This is a mixed-use development," Darius explained, his tone deliberately neutral. "Retail space on the ground floor, offices above. It's a completely legitimate enterprise. But Rico Vargas thinks I'm interfering with more than just his one project. Vargas is realizing that your presence makes it more difficult for him to operate. You have an expertise he can't easily dismiss or intimidate." We stopped at a window opening that overlooked the city. This is exactly the kind of prime location he would have wanted for his warehouse. We acquired the property before he could make a move. The pieces clicked into place. "You're using legitimate developments to block his illegal ones." "I'm using legitimate developments to expand my business portfolio," he corrected. "If that expansion happens to curtail his options, that's a secondary benefit." He studied the view, but his focus was elsewhere. "And now he's decided to use you to get to me." He left a note. That's not exactly a direct assault. Darius turned to face me, and the intensity in his dark eyes pinned me to the spot. "It's a warning shot. It's a declaration of intent. The next time, it won't be a piece of paper." "So what do?" "We tighten security. You go nowhere without Malik or someone equally capable. And..." The explosion wasn't a deafening roar. It was more of a muffled whump from somewhere deep within the building's structure. But the floor shuddered violently, and Darius's reflexes were instantaneous. He lunged, grabbing me and pulling me away from the window as shouts erupted from the floor below. "Stay behind me." His voice had gone ice cold. "All business." He moved toward the stairs, one hand gripping my arm, the other reaching for something tucked at the small of his back. A gun, I realized with a sense of distant shock. He was armed. Malik appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his own weapon drawn. "Gas main rupture in the sub-basement. It's contained, but we need to evacuate." Could have been deliberate. Darius's grip on my arm tightened. We descended the stairs quickly, his body shielding me from any potential line of fire. Workers streamed past us toward the exits, their movements organized in a way that suggested they had drilled for this exact scenario. We made it to the car without further incident, but Darius didn't relax his guard until we were several blocks away. He kept his hand on my knee, his fingers pressing hard enough to leave indentations through the fabric of my jeans. "Are you hurt?" His voice was raw. "No, I'm fine." "Darius, look at me." He finally did, and what I saw in his face made something in my chest constrict. It wasn't just fear, it was a profound terror, the kind that comes from having experienced devastating loss before. "I'm okay," I repeated, my voice softer. His hand moved from my knee to cup my face, his thumb brushing against my cheekbone. "This isn't worth $500,000. This isn't worth any amount of money." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this contract ends tonight. I'll still pay you the full amount. I'll still destroy Marcus. But you're going somewhere safe until..." "No." The word was out before I could stop it. "Amara, no. I'm not running away because someone tried to scare us with an explosion that was probably just a construction mishap." The lie felt thin even as I said it, but I pressed on. "I signed a contract for 6 months. I don't break my commitments." Something shifted in his expression. The terror was still there, but it was now mingled with something else. Something that looked dangerously like admiration. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or a complete fool." "Probably both," I admitted, my pulse thrumming in my throat. "But I'm not leaving." The car pulled into the secure underground garage beneath the penthouse. Neither of us moved to get out. Darius's hand was still against my face, warm and possessive, and I couldn't remember why I had been so insistent on separate bedrooms and professional distance. "I lost someone once," he said, his voice quiet. "My wife, 7 years ago. We were driving home from dinner. A car ran us off the road. I survived. She didn't." The pain in his voice was raw, unfiltered. "Darius, I'm so sorry. They were targeting me. A rival organization sending a message. I swore after that night that I would never put anyone in that position again. That I would never care about someone enough to make them a target. But you married me?" "Because it was supposed to be a contract," he said. "Business. No genuine emotion involved." His thumb traced the line of my jaw, and his eyes held mine with an intensity that stole the air from my lungs. Except somewhere between the gala and tonight, that changed. I should have pulled away. I should have reminded him of our agreement, of the terms, of the clear boundaries we had established. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch. Darius, this isn't. He kissed me before I could finish the sentence. It wasn't a gentle or tentative kiss. It was a claiming, a desperate collision that tasted of fear and relief and something far deeper that neither of us had a name for. His hand slid into my hair, angling my head as he deepened the kiss, and I responded with an equal, surprising ferocity, months of unspoken tension finally finding a release. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, he pressed his forehead against mine. "I can't lose you," he whispered. "I won't survive it a second time." "Then don't push me away." I gripped the lapels of his jacket, anchoring myself to him. "We face this together, or we don't face it at all." He let out a short, almost bitter laugh. "You have no idea what you're asking for. Then show me. No more protecting me from the truth. No more treating me like I'm made of glass. If I'm in danger, I need to know everything." He pulled back just enough to study my face, searching for something. Whatever he found seemed to satisfy him because he nodded slowly. "Everything," he agreed. "Starting with the fact that Rico Vargas isn't acting alone. Someone inside my organization has been feeding him information. Someone who knew exactly where you would be today." The implication washed over me like ice water. "You have a traitor." "I have a problem," he corrected. "That could get us both killed if I don't identify them first." He finally released me, his posture straightening. "Welcome to my world, Amara. It's significantly more complicated than building codes and foundation plans." We exited the car and walked toward the elevator. I realized with a startling clarity that the contract I had signed had become irrelevant somewhere along the way. This was no longer about money or revenge on Marcus. This was about survival, about partnership, and about something that felt dangerously close to the kind of connection I had sworn I would never risk again. The elevator doors closed, sealing us inside, and Darius reached for my hand. I let him take it, my fingers intertwining with his, and I didn't let go until we reached the penthouse. Darius's penthouse transformed into a war room overnight. Architectural drawings on the dining table were replaced with city maps, locations marked with colored pins and circles. Naomi arrived at dawn, carrying files thick enough to be used as weapons, and she and her brother spent hours poring over surveillance data and financial records, searching for patterns I couldn't begin to comprehend. I had been effectively quarantined in my bedroom, with Malik stationed outside the door like a particularly intimidating gargoyle. I was protected, secured, and completely useless. By noon, I'd had enough. "This is absurd," I pushed past Malik, ignoring his quiet protest, and marched into the dining room where Darius and Naomi were huddled over a series of photos. "You can't just lock me in a room like some damsel in distress." Darius looked up, the exhaustion plain in the dark circles under his eyes. "I can keep you safe. That is all that matters right now. Safe and ignorant. You promised me no more secrets, no more protecting me from the truth." That promise lasted less than 12 hours. Naomi glanced from me to her brother, a calculating look in her eyes. "She has a point, Darius. If she's the target, she has a right to understand the threat." "The threat," Darius said, his voice hard, "is that Rico has a source inside my organization who knew Amara would be at that construction site. Until I know who it is, everyone is a potential suspect, even Naomi." I moved to the table, studying the photos. They showed men in expensive suits, some of whom I recognized from the gala. Even Malik's face was there. Malik has been with me for 15 years. Naomi is my sister. But yes, technically, until I have proof, everyone is compromised. The admission clearly cost him. I could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his fingers dug into the edge of the table. "Then let me help." I pulled out an empty chair and sat down, uninvited. "I'm an architect. I solve complex structural problems by identifying patterns and weaknesses. Maybe I can see something that you're missing." Naomi raised an eyebrow at Darius. "I like her. She's tenacious." "Tenacious is one word for it," Darius muttered. But he gestured to the files spread across the table. "Fine. These are the individuals who had access to your location yesterday. 23 people with knowledge of my schedule, security movements, or both. I scanned the list of names. Most meant nothing to me, but a few were familiar. Business associates from the gala, partners Darius had mentioned in passing. And there, near the bottom, was a name that made my stomach clench. Marcus Thorne's law firm is Thorne & Associates, I said slowly. That's the same firm that handles the real estate transactions for your legitimate construction company. Darius and Naomi exchanged a sharp look. How do you know that? Darius asked. Because Marcus used to boast about landing them as a client. He said they represented some of the most powerful developers in the city. I pulled the relevant file closer. If Marcus has access to his firm's client files, he would know about your projects, your timelines, your site locations, everything. Naomi was already on her phone, speaking in rapid, low tones. Darius leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that sent a wave of heat across my skin. You're right. Marcus could be funneling information to Rico through legal channels, keeping his own hands clean while causing maximum disruption. But why? What would he gain from it? Revenge, most likely, I said. You humiliated him by marrying me. His political ambitions depend on a pristine public image, and your success is a direct reflection of his failure. Darius stood and paced to the window. Or Rico is paying him. My sources indicate Marcus has significant gambling debts. The pieces clicked together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Marcus, desperate and vindictive, selling information that could get me killed. The man I had almost married. If it is Marcus, how do we prove it? I asked. Darius turned back from the window. We set a trap. We feed him false information through a channel he would have access to. Then we watch to see if Rico acts on it. And when Rico acts, I said, the realization dawning on me, I'm the bait. Absolutely not, Darius crossed back, to the table in 2 long strides. We use a decoy, a false lead that suggests you'll be at a location where, in reality, you will be nowhere in the vicinity. That could work, Naomi said, ending her call and rejoining the discussion. But the bait has to be convincing. It needs to be information so valuable that Rico can't afford to ignore it. I studied the maps on the table, the marked locations of Darius's various enterprises. An idea began to form, risky and probably reckless, but with a certain structural logic. What if we use architecture as the bait? I looked up at Darius. I've been working on a new design for a waterfront development. Mixed use, prime real estate. Exactly the kind of project Rico would want to sabotage or steal for himself. We let it slip that I'm presenting the plans to a group of investors at a specific time and place. And when Rico sends his people to intercept the plans, Darius finished, nodding slowly. We'll have confirmation that Marcus is the leak. It's dangerous, he added. Everything about this is dangerous, I countered. At least this way, we're controlling the narrative. We're designing the structure of the confrontation. Naomi offered a sharp, approving smile. I'm starting to see why you married her, brother. She thinks like one of us. She thinks like an architect, Darius corrected. But there was a new softness in his expression. Everything is about structure and stability. He looked at me. All right, we'll do it. But it will be on my terms, with my security protocols in place. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of controlled chaos. I refined the architectural plans until they looked like a project worth millions, a prize worth taking a risk for. Darius arranged for the false information to be planted where sources at Marcus's law firm would find it. The presentation was scheduled to take place at a warehouse Darius controlled in Pullman, the same South Side neighborhood where Rico had wanted to build his own suspicious development. The security preparations were extensive. The warehouse was outfitted with hidden cameras covering every angle. Armed guards were positioned on all approaches, and multiple escape routes were planned down to the second. Malik walked me through the protocols so many times I could recite them in my sleep. The night before the planned event, I found it impossible to rest. A cocktail of adrenaline and anxiety had me pacing my bedroom until I finally gave up and wandered into the living room. Darius was sitting on the couch in the dark, the city lights providing the only illumination. He had changed into a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, the first time I'd ever seen him in anything other than a perfectly tailored suit. It made him seem more human, more approachable. Couldn't sleep either. I settled on the opposite end of the couch, maintaining a careful distance. Sleep feels like a luxury these days. He studied me in the dim light. You don't have to go through with this tomorrow, Amara. We can find another way. I want to, not just to find the leak, but because I'm tired of feeling helpless. I pulled my knees to my chest, wrapping my arms around them. When Marcus humiliated me, I felt so powerless, like my life was something that was just happening to me, not something I was choosing. I refuse to feel that way ever again, even if it means walking into a trap, especially then, because this time I'm walking into it with my eyes open, with a plan, with backup, with a choice. That's the difference. Darius was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved closer, closing the space between us until his shoulder brushed against mine. For what it's worth, I understand. After my first wife died, I spent 2 years building walls so high no one could ever get close again. It didn't bring her back, but it gave me the illusion of control. What changed? Nothing, until recently. Until a woman in a crimson dress was crying on a curb and looked at me like I was either her salvation or the next disaster waiting to happen. His hand found mine in the darkness, his fingers lacing with mine. You make me want to tear down those walls, Amara. And that is terrifying. I turned to look at him, searching his face for the truth behind his words. Darius, when this is over, when the 6 months are up, don't. He cupped my face with his free hand, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. Don't think about contracts or timelines right now. Just be here, with me. I should have pulled away. I should have reminded us both of the boundaries and the business arrangement. Instead, I leaned into his touch and let him kiss me. It was a kiss of profound gentleness, a stark contradiction to the violent reputation that preceded him. We stayed on that couch until the dawn painted the sky over the lake in shades of pink and gold, talking about everything and nothing, carefully avoiding the subject of the dangerous day ahead. He told me about growing up in the shadow of his powerful father, learning the family business before he fully understood its implications. I told him about the challenges of building a career in a male-dominated field, of having to fight for respect on every project. By the time Naomi arrived with coffee and final instructions, something fundamental had shifted between us. Our partnership had deepened into a connection that neither of us was ready to name, but both of us could no longer ignore. Ready? Darius asked as we prepared to leave for the warehouse. I checked my bag, making sure the rolled-up blueprints were secure. As I'll ever be. Malik drove us to Pullman in a tense, heavy silence. The warehouse looked innocuous from the outside, just another brick industrial building in a long row of them. Inside, it had been transformed into a convincing presentation space, complete with display boards, focused lighting, and even a podium for my supposed pitch. The investors are my men, Darius explained, gesturing to 3 men in business suits who,